Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to my channel for another Hot Toys 1/6 scale figure and vehicle unboxing and review. Today we're taking a look at Vengeance, the Batcycle, and the Bat-Signal from the 2022 film The Batman. Now I got mine at a discount from Pop Collectibles. As always, do your own research, make sure you are comfortable before buying. I have popped the link to their site in the description below, along with the discount code Justin's Collection, for 5% off your order if you do decide to buy from them. While you're down there, why not hit that subscribe, bell notification icon, and join button, so you're notified as soon as a brand new Hot Toys review goes live on the channel. We are going to start off with the Batcycle first, then we'll move on to the main event, Batman with the Bat-Signal. As for the box art, yeah, it is understated in this black and silver motif, yet they've hit it with a metallic finish, so when the light bounces off the surface, it absolutely pops. And there are some red accents here and there. We've got the Batman logo, these little bits and pieces in the corners. Then on the bottom right-hand corner, a Batman logo done in high gloss with a couple of images of the figure himself and the actual Hot Toys Batcycle. Whereas on the side of the box, quite straightforward actually, just a Batman logo. And it's done in a metallic finish, so once again, the light just bounces off the surface beautifully. And then around the back, warnings and legal information. And what do you know? It's raining in Gotham. It seems to always be raining in this interpretation of Gotham. In fact, some of the early reviews actually criticized the film for being as dark as it is. Not dark as in gritty, but dark as in literally dark, raining, gloomy. But for me, that just added to the vibe. But yeah, I know, different strokes for different folks, I guess. Not everyone is gonna like everything. Underneath the slipcover, an open window showcasing the Batcycle inside. Now, underneath that slipcover, this is where the color comes in. There is so much more red. We do have the Batman logo on the side of the box, and way more artwork around the back. We've got Gotham City, the Batman through the middle with an image of Pattinson just spliced in there, as well as a couple more product shots of Batman as well as the Batcycle. I am pretty curious to see how many people actually decide to get the Batcycle. I was all in because I freaking love this movie, but it also only featured for what, like 30 seconds right at the end of the film, so I understand if you decide to pass on it. First in-hand impressions, this is surprisingly hefty, and I am loving the weathering. What we are going to do now, though, is move on to Vengeance himself. Okay, so this box is absolutely massive. It is significantly larger than the Batcycle one. And a lot more colourful too. We've got some blue in the bottom right hand corner and way more red, also done in that same metallic finish as the Batcycle box, by the way. We have an image of Pattinson, the Bat-Signal, and a Batman logo, plus a cheeky little cameo from the Riddler. I really wish Hot Toys had made a Riddler. Unfortunately, as we know, they decided not to. Down below on this wraparound banner, Batman and Bat-Signal, the Batman logo, as well as an image of the actual Hot Toys Batman and their Bat-Signal. On the side of the box, you can see how metallic the surface is, especially for the Batman logo in the middle. Then down below for the wraparound banner that continues to, wrap around, you have this scratching on the surface, it's high gloss, and there's another Batman logo that does pop against the dark color for the rest of the banner. Around the back, I expected the red. The red is such a vibe, and it works perfectly for this universe, this version of Batman. The blue, though, completely unexpected. Having the red and blue at odds with one another in different corners on the back of the box, I actually really like that. We've got Gotham City up top with the rain coming down, and a bunch of question marks in high gloss over the blue part. Then straight through the middle, warnings and legal information. But underneath the slipcover, around the back specifically, there is a little bit more artwork. But before we get there, an open window showcasing the figure, his accessories, and the Bat-Signal inside, and you can tell that this box is just packed to the gills with stuff, and I cannot wait to get it all set up. Unlike the Batcycle, where it was less colourful on the outside, then the red came into effect on the inside underneath the slipcover, for Batman and the Bat-Signal, it's actually reversed, so the artwork underneath everything is two-tone, it's black and white. We have an image of Vengeance, the Batman straight through the middle, still absolutely love that image with a little bit of side-eye going on. Bat-Signal, couple more product shots on the other side. Dude, this is where the fun begins. I don't know if I'm ready for this. I've been waiting for the Batman figure for freaking ages. Ever since that film came out, I knew I had to have this guy in 1/6 scale. And this isn't the only version we're getting either. We're also getting an in-art, the Batman. We will do comparisons when we eventually get that one, but right now, first in-hand impressions for the Hot Toys Pattinson. So far, so good. I am loving the feel of this guy in hand, the materials and the heft. What we are going to do now, though, is get all of his accessories laid out in the light box and take a closer look at everything he comes with. And of course the Batcycle, which is huge. Starting off with the display base first, or should I be saying display bases? Because technically you can split it off into two distinct bases. It's quite modular. We'll discuss how it works in just a second. This first one is more of a classic rectangular style base. Around the front for the nameplate, we have a bat symbol, his name, and a teeny tiny little The Batman logo down below. It's also done in this bright chrome on an otherwise matte textured surface. Up top, we have multiple different pieces of artwork as base toppers. If you decide that you like one enough to stick with it long term, they are adhesive backed, so you can adhere it down to the surface if you so choose. Or you can just use the crotch grabber to hold it in place. It's not super secure, they will slide around on you, but if you do like the option of being able to switch it every now and then, I think just popping them down, then using the crotch grabber to hold them in position is the best option. This first one has some very chrome, bright red artwork on that textured black background. The next one is the explosion reflecting off the wet ground that Batman's walking on towards Penguin in his Maserati Ghibli. Then the last one is an extension of the Diorama display base. This will make a little bit more sense when we connect the two. Up top, an adjustable crotch grabber. Oh, you all know I love my Diorama display bases, and this one is my new favorite from Hot Toys. It seems simple enough, right? It's some steps, a chunk of a building, and a railing. But it's so much more than that. And the fact that it's very well detailed doesn't hurt. Having all of this silver dry brushing on the edges, the chipping on the front of the steps, the washers in the crevices, the rust work, the red windows that add a much needed pop of colour, and especially this building portion. Having all this texture, then the speckling on the surface and the brown shading, it looks very convincing. It looks like an aged, worn building. The crotch grabber, by the way, is removable, but it does leave behind this crevice, which I wish I was able to fill because it is quite ugly. You can flip the crotch grabber around too if you want Batman facing the other way, perhaps in his wingsuit. Now, I'm just going to remove this because you'll see why in just a second. These side pieces are interchangeable, so if you do want to flip them round and have the railing on this side, totally an option. Now, the display base itself, the bottom portion, actually has a cheeky little light-up effect. There is a USB-C port, so when you plug in a USB-C cable, not included, you do get the bottom steps lighting up. Right now, it looks a little bit weird because the top doesn't light up. I would have liked to have seen power transferred through to the top so that it could have lit up. Although, when you remove this piece and switch it up a little by plugging it into this top part, then that top row of steps is gone anyway, so it's not a massive deal. Then, as you can see, this part is sitting quite high now. You're supposed to bring in the standard display base and just have it sitting like that. So now you have an additional bottom step, but this time instead of the red windows, there's a Batman nameplate. And there's a much flatter surface up top for Batman to stand on. That's why I ditched the crotch grabber. Now there is a third option which I don't like quite as much as this one. You're supposed to remove these two pieces, then bring in the display base, and it's going to be kind of tricky to show this one on camera, and then slot it like this, so it's just one big platform. It's quite long now, and instead of having just one crevice for the crotch grabber, you have two of them. This is probably more so meant for a dynamic pose fighting Riddler, perhaps? I don't think I'm ever going to use this option in the display. Still, if you want it, it's absolutely there. One of the more interesting things about Pattinson's very functional Batsuit were the grappling guns. Having them just flick out from the gauntlet at a moment's notice, just always being at the ready, I love that. And of course you can recreate that in 6 scale. You get these swap-out versions though, they don't actually extend, which is perfectly fine with me because all of these little armatures would be very, very fiddly. There is some silver chipping here and there, and some interchangeable front pieces for the grappling hooks. This one is smaller, whereas the other is significantly longer. The only complaint I have with this is that I kinda wish there was a mid-length one, and 2 of all of these, because of course we get 2 grappling guns, one for the left side and one for the right. Right now, you have to decide which one's going to shoot which cable, or grappling hook, because of course this one has no cable. Speaking of the cable, the rod is made of metal. We do get 3 interchangeable faceplates. Now, I'm not going to go into full detail now because that's boring. We want to see them actually in the cowl, of course. Just know that we have 3 of them and the detail is really freaking good. Same thing with the Robert Pattinson head sculpt. We'll save it for when we pop it on the body. Just know that it's here and you get some interchangeable bangs, plus it has moving eyes and a rubbery neck gasket piece, so when you plug it onto the suit, it's a more seamless connection. I suppose this does go along with the uncowled head sculpt because it's just an empty cowl meant for him to hold or for you to pop on the display base as some set dressing. There's leather grain texture absolutely everywhere. We've got the little neck piece with the various sections working their way up to the chin. It's completely hollow, so you can have it sitting on a post or a little display stand of some kind. And there are washers in the crevices for all of the stitching, so it does pop against the otherwise very black, kind of shiny surface. Some people confuse these for batarangs. They're actually not. They're more so bat utility blades. In the movie, he does have batarangs, we just never get to see him use them. They never made the final cut of the film, unfortunately. If you're curious what Pattinson's batarangs look like, go ahead and check out the concept art book. Now, we do get 3 of these in total. A folded up one, a more flat edge one, and a slightly angled one, already installed into his chest plate as his chest symbol. They're also made of die-cast metal, so they feel cold to the touch and nice and hefty and premium. This is a surprise. I thought these would be made of plastic 100%. There is silver scratching on both sides, painted in high gloss black, and adding some pops of orange on the wings and on the ear tips just helps add a little bit more visual interest. His bat handcuffs aren't unfortunately made of die-cast, these are plastic. The sheen, however, is quite convincing. Being as metallic as they are and the sculpt work being really sharp with the rivets, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if you thought this was die-cast. It isn't, it's plastic. You can open up the handcuffs and you can fold them up. There isn't anywhere that I found to store these on him, and I don't think I'm ever actually going to use these with him. Still, if you want to, they're there. Some people swear black and blue that he used this sticky bomb gun in the movie. I never saw it, so please help me out. If you know the timestamp for the moment where he did use it, just pop it down in the comments section. I would still rather have it than not, because it was sitting in his holster the whole time. It's still there, he just never used it, I don't think. It's painted in this bright shiny silver, got washers in the crevices, and a removable cartridge for the middle. Once you slot it in, it is kind of tricky to remove. This point right here, you're supposed to wedge the included tool, that piece, in that hole so you can push the cartridge out. You can also actually install one of the sticky bombs into the barrel. It's more so meant for him to hold it because if you wedge it in there all the way, I promise you, you are never going to be able to remove it. These smaller pieces are more so meant to be displayed in the pockets on his belt, I think, rather than being held. Although the flare, I can totally see myself using in a pose. You do get the collapsed and the extended versions, plus 2 teeny little adrenaline syringes. For as small as these pieces are, there is a surprising amount of detail here, including some silver pitting on the surface. I'm really glad they included this. Paper accessories are some of my all-time favorite. The envelope says "To the Batman" on the front, and you can take the card out. It's printed on both sides, including a mini little barcode. Plus, the writing is very, very crisp on the inside. And it's got this high gloss feel about it, so it does come across as though it's an actual card. After the unboxing segment off camera, I went through the instructions and I stumbled across this little sheet. It's a bonus piece of paper, if you will. It shows that this guy does come with 2 capes, and for the life of me, I couldn't find the secondary cape. If you're looking for it, it's tucked up underneath the bloody clam tray. That's why I couldn't find it, and the clam tray is massive for the deluxe set. So yes, you do get a switch-out cape. This one is slightly longer, and there's a wire on the bottom as well as the edges and the spines through the middle. This one is meant to be used when you have him posed on the Batcycle. I like that this is included. It's of course his wingsuit. I personally won't ever be using it though. We'll go into much more detail as to why when we actually pop this on him later in the video. This multi-purpose tool we have seen before from Hot Toys, and it is used for multiple purposes. It's used to pop the canister out of the sticky bomb gun, it's used to remove the chest symbol, and it's also used to move the eyes around for both the cowled and uncowled head sculpts. If you lose this, don't worry, most of that stuff can be achieved just using your fingers. You don't have to use the tool if you don't want to. The accessories just keep on coming. Next up, we have this cardboard diorama backdrop. It is self-supporting, you just fold out these pieces on the edges, then flip down the piece in the middle, and it should hold itself up and in position. Unfortunately, it is starting to warp a little. It's not a massive issue right now, I am worried that it is going to get worse over time. One of the main reasons why I think it is warping is because it's lenticular, and the lenticular stripes are going horizontally, so it's kind of curving inwards. Still, the effect is so freaking neat. When you shift this round, it actually looks like a 3D image as though the fire is moving. Then the same thing can be said for the Batman logo. It also moves around as you shift this thing in your hands. Now, if you'll remember back to the display base toppers, this backdrop is meant to be used with this base topper. If you pair them up, this is supposed to be reflecting off the wet glossy surface of the road. And to be honest, it kind of works for me. And lastly, a full array of hands, ranging from these grapnel gun holding hands, which is a very specific gesture, to closed fists, gripping hands, one open palm hand only for the left side, and two just relaxed hands already installed on him. I never actually noticed this in the movie, but on these two fingertips there are these little silver pieces, and they are consistent across all the hands. I suppose that Hot Toys does have way more reference than any of us do, so if they added them, they are supposed to be there. The hands themselves are asymmetrical. We do have this little smartwatch only on the left side hands, whereas on the right, it's more of a smooth glossy panel. They've even added some speckling, some pitting of silver on the big chunky knuckles. What we are going to do now, though, is get Vengeance himself out here. Standing straight up and down in the lightbox, no crazy poses or accessories or anything like that. I have, however, popped all the little bits and pieces on his belt and the sticky bomb gun in the holster, just to complete the look, of course. Now, I don't know about y'all, for me, just at a distance zoomed out the way we are, this guy looks darn near perfect. I think this is as close as Hot Toys have ever come to a perfect figure. We will, of course, dive a lot more into that when we take him off the turntable. Just rotating around, the proportions are solid, the outfit to me looks accurate, and it's a mix of fabric and sculpted pieces. You get a bunch of accessories, multiple options for the head sculpts, both cowled and uncowled, moving eyes, decent articulation, the Batcycle if you decide to go down that route, and a massive bat signal in the deluxe set. So if you are after presence in the display and you're a massive fan of Robert Pattinson in the cape and cowl like I am, I honestly don't think we can do much better than this. Up close and personal, kicking things off with Batman's cowled head sculpt. We will try out the Robert Pattinson one in just a second. I don't know about y'all, the likeness for me is uncanny. I can 100% see Robert Pattinson. The way he's got the very chiseled jawline, the 5 o'clock shadow down below, some lighter shading in certain sections, and then the eyes. The eyes sell it for me because, number one, you can move them, and number two, in the film, because the cowl is so restrictive, Robert Pattinson himself said this, he had to convey a lot of his emotion through his eyes, and being able to move them around and just tilt the cowl forward, it makes him look so freaking mean, and I cannot get over how good this looks. Then the cowl itself with all of the texture, the lumps and bumps and scratches on the surface, the stitching with the washes in all of that sculpt work to bring out that detail, I am over the moon with how this sculpt turned out. Am I being a little bit too frivolous with the praise? No, I don't think I am. I genuinely think this head sculpt is that good. I've now moved his eyes off to the side, by the way, and it was relatively easy to do. The head sculpt is on a magnet, the eyes are on joysticks, and you do get a little tool that you can use to adjust them, but your finger works just as well. Now, this mouth plate I don't think is quite as good as the neutral one. I can still see the likeness to Pattinson from certain angles, yet front on, I do think you'll lose it a little. The detail, though, next level. We've got the 5 o'clock shadow, got the little mole on one side, and the teeth being inserted behind the mouth, there is a natural shadow, an actual gap between the teeth and the lips. And the teeth are slightly translucent, which makes them look so much more realistic. Look, if there's an angry faceplate on offer, even if the likeness is the worst of the three options, I'm always going to take it because I'd rather have one for action poses than not at all. That's the case this time round. The angry faceplate to me doesn't really read Robert Pattinson. Once again though, the sculpt work, impeccable. And now you can see way more of his teeth, with that subtle translucency, the gloss to them, and the washes in the crevices so you can make out each individual tooth. Back to stock and back to my favourite mouthplate. I'm not sure if you can tell, one of his eyes, this one, is slightly wider open than the other, which just makes for a really interesting look when you give him a subtle head tilt. Also, if you find that when you angle the cowl forward, his mouth plate juts out a touch, that's because the rest of the cowl is underneath his chin and part of the faceplate. So when it butts up against the neck piece, which is also really well sculpted and detailed with the leather grain texture on it, it does get out of alignment and jut forward. Just angle the head sculpt up a touch and push it back in position. That should fix it immediately. And then there's the collar. Because it is so high and the head sculpt is completely unhindered by a ball joint because it's on a magnet, you can potentially rub it up against the faceplate itself. So just be careful. The last thing you'd want to do is to rub up this piece against the faceplate and do some damage to the paint applications. Oh, and same thing with the Bruce Wayne head sculpt. Because his neck is fully painted and sculpted all the way down inside the crevice and you have to really push it in there to lock it in position, you might do some damage with the friction against those paint apps, so just exercise caution. Now, it does also sit quite low, and that's because you're not supposed to use the cape with the Bruce Wayne head sculpt. You're technically supposed to remove the chest plate and take the cape off, which we will do in just a second. I thought we'd try it out with the cape on first. Now, he does have two different hairstyles, and the eyes can move on the Bruce Wayne sculpt as well. This is the cleaner hairstyle with the fringe combed perhaps off to the side. The detail is great with the little spiky strands of hair down below. They are made of a rubbery plastic. The skin texture, really HD. And of course, he's got his running eye makeup. I've always said that why would you hide the eye makeup? Even with Affleck's version of Batman, when his cowl came off, the eye makeup magically disappeared. Treat this as war paint. It makes him look even more badass. And that's exactly what they did in The Batman. Finally, he was the first version of Batsy to do it, and I loved that attention to detail. Speaking of attention to detail, they've even made his eyes slightly red and added in some burst blood vessels. Dude isn't getting much sleep. At this point, he's been going out at night for 2 years, kicking criminals' asses as vengeance. So having his eyes be bloodshot, just massive tick from me. This fringe piece I think works slightly better with the red eyes and the running eye makeup. Seeing that one poking through the fringe just gives him this real emo look. Whereas the more styled, clean hair piece doesn't work as well. If only we'd gotten another one of these head sculpts still painted just as well, but without the red eyes and without the eye makeup. That way we could have had Bruce displayed as though he's about to go out as Batman with the clean hair piece, or as though he's just come home from a very successful night fighting crime, with the messy hairpiece. If you want to move his eyes, it is relatively straightforward. When you take off that hairpiece, you can see that the seam, by the way, almost completely disappears. Very well hidden. When you take off the back hairpiece, then you get access to the joysticks. Everything is held on with magnets and quite securely, I might add. Just be careful because some of these little hair strands do like to get caught on the inside of the sculpt. When you assemble everything back up, can't even really tell that it comes apart. Oh, I'm in trouble. This is how I end up with second copies of my favourite figures, because having another display option like this with the Bruce Wayne head sculpt without the cape on, and now holding the cowl, it just makes him look completely different, visually distinct from the fully caped and cowled version of Batman. Yeah, I think I might have to pick up a second one now. Also, because we ditched the cape, his neck doesn't look as short with this particular sculpt on. Historically, Hot Toys have really struggled with Batman capes. We've had some okay ones and some absolute dogshit ones. This cape is more on the okay end. In fact, I'd say that it's pretty good. You've got some wires down the spines and the edges for the shorter one, not along the bottom, whereas with the longer cape, you also have wires down the bottom. It doesn't make a ton of sense that it's as weathered as it is front and back because it's quite short. It wouldn't be able to drag along the ground picking up dirt. Still, I'm always going to take more detail than less, so having this dirt here, it's not distracting, I'm perfectly fine with it. The material choice is pretty interesting. It's almost this waxy feeling nylon. It is not pleather, so you do not have to worry about this cracking, flaking, or peeling over time, even if you get dynamic with it and use the wires for posing. There's only one area where I find it a little bit inaccurate. Around the front, the way it overlaps, this panel over that one, with the pleats, it's not quite right. It's supposed to be two separate pieces going into the chest plate. Overlapping, that's not screen accurate, at least as far as the reference that I've been able to find. I have just quickly removed the cape again so we can discuss all of the detail that was hiding under it. We've got these padded armor plates, the two zippers, and these little elastic pieces that would hold the suit together. I'm pretty sure this was some kind of repurposed flight suit in the movie that was turned into the Batsuit. The color looks very accurate to me. It's slightly green with a hint of warmness around the edges. That's supposed to simulate some weathering. And up top for the cowl, having this X stitched in, that's held down with Velcro, and it's made of a softer rubbery plastic. Around the front, some people were saying that the proportions were a little bit off, and he looked slightly too skinny. I don't think that's the case. In the film and in real life, Pattinson isn't a bodybuilder. He is pretty lean and quite narrow-shouldered. Yes, he filled out the suit, but he does in figure format as well, and you can futz with stuff. If you want to move the shoulder pads up, if you want to mess around with the chest plate because it's on Velcro, just move that up too. Totally doable. Speaking of the chest plate, I was always under the impression that this was the same material as the rest of his suit. Now that I've looked at more reference, I think this is quite accurate. Having a difference in sheen and texture compared to the ab section looks about right to me. All of the detail is there. It's also made of this slightly soft rubbery plastic. Got some silver dry brushing, some glossy rivets, and some dirt and grime around the edges. The texture at play is really, really fine. Now the bat symbol is removable, but it's pretty tricky to do. You do have to wedge the tool in there to pop the darn thing out. This is the tool that I'm referring to. The instructions do tell you to grab it in the middle and remove it, so I found, yeah, that's the best way to get that done. They've even gone so far as to add some detail underneath in the crevice where the bat symbol sits with that silver dry brushing. There is chipping absolutely everywhere on this thing, and some pops of orange in certain places. You're not really supposed to use this one to have him hold, you're more so supposed to use one of the other ones that he comes with. And just like those other ones, this is also made out of die-cast metal. The shoulder pads, the bicep guards, and the gauntlets, they're all made of that softer rubbery plastic. There is some bright silver in certain areas, this strap painted in yellow with a wash over the top, and there is texture in little bits and pieces on those armor plates, for the inside of the bicep and on the shoulder pads. These are on Velcro too, so if you want to remove them, you can foreseeably take them off if you want to mess around with the outfit. The flight suit underneath is a mix of different colors and styles of fabric. We've got some stretchy spandex up under there. We also have some slightly warmer tone material, and those pieces of string that work their way down underneath the gauntlets. These straps are rubbery plastics too, so I don't think you have to worry about these breaking off on you. One of my favorite things about this bat suit were the grappling guns. He doesn't have to reach down to some mystery pocket on his belt anymore. They are built into his gauntlets. They can spring forward whenever he needs them, and he can use them mid-combat, which he absolutely did. Now you can switch these parts out in 1/6 scale. It's pretty straightforward to do. They're just held on with some little friction pegs, and you get some hands specifically designed to hold onto the grapnel guns on both sides. These little hooks are removable if you so choose. You have the smaller collapsed one and the extended version. Am I going to potentially display him with the grappling guns out? Maybe. I do dig how seamlessly it all comes together. I'm 99% sure his belt is a repurposed police belt. That's what it looks like to me with that signature weave sculpted in. You also have this triangular little carabiner down below. You can remove some of these pockets if you want to, and you are specifically supposed to do that when you pop him on the bike, because you are going to need that extra range of motion to ratchet the legs forward, so they're not colliding with these pouches. This one contains these sticky bombs, the little mines. These two have his adrenaline shots in them, and by all means you can open these up if you so choose and take the adrenaline shot out, same for both of them. You also have his flare and his UV torch canisters. These do wedge in there nice and securely. you might struggle to take them out. So just take your time with it and try not to do any damage to the paint applications. There is a lot of friction at play. Coming down to the holster, it does contain his sticky bomb gun, which, like we discussed in the accessory segment, he never actually used in the film. At least I don't think he did. You can remove this, it's held in via a strap and Velcro. Then to reinstall it, you want to wedge the handle underneath this strap up the top. That's step one. Once you have it sitting in place, then you can close up the holster itself and lock everything in position. The pants for the flight suit are predominantly grey with a little bit of a green tint thrown in, which is supposed to be there. All of the armor plates, they're stitched in place and properly padded, so they sit proud of the surface, your finger will catch them, and they've weathered the edges. That adds a lot of depth. The straps on the holster do have the grey lines over the top, and some very shiny buckles. Plus, there's so much detail working its way down the leg, just like around the back up top underneath the cape. Speaking of around the back, you do have some stretchy spandex. Having some spandex back here, you can't really see it from the front, and it also should make our job easier when trying to pop him on the Batcycle. These straps with the yellow, accurate, same thing with the yellow on top of the boots, and then the boots themselves being made out of this softer rubbery material and being a split cut boot design, that's just going to give us so much range of motion. There's all this wrinkling sculpted in, there's dry brushing, got some perforations, some zippers, and some stitching. Whereas for the boots themselves, they are very chonky. And we've got some fully sculpted tread that's even been painted, which is pretty surprising actually, on the underside of his shoes to spend the budget on painting this as well. They've even added some silver little eyelets and buckles on the front of the boot, which normally wouldn't even be seen that easily tucked up underneath this boot guard. Just quickly, I don't know how many of y'all are actually going to display him like this. It's there if you want it. It's his Sugar Glider wingsuit. Considering this is one of his biggest goofs in the movie, trying out the wingsuit and unfortunately failing, I don't want to commemorate that in my display. The yellow I like, and the mix of fabrics with this satin finish parachute material in the slightly shinier sections, the working pockets and all of these zippers being real, that's great, but you're losing everything underneath, all of the detail on the suit. If you are wondering if he can pose enough to get into a convincing wingsuit pose, yeah, absolutely, his head can angle all the way forward, so it does look like he's flying. When you have him in this, you are going to want to spread his legs out to give him that star-like appearance. This is just hollow down below, there's nothing to actually cinch it around his legs other than these strings. But the instructions do tell you just to leave them dangling, so they're not really meant to be actually cinched around his limbs. Unnecessary, you don't have to go that far. My first two takeaways about the bat signal: number one, it's quite substantial in size, you'll see what I mean when we do a comparison to Batman a little bit later. And number two, it looks and feels like it's made of metal. Not necessarily in terms of the weight, because it's pretty light actually, because it's entirely made of plastic. It's more so the texture and the paint applications that are convincing me that it's actually a metal object. It's got this rough finish on the surface. It feels like old, rusty, nasty metal. And that's all the way around. Even tucked up underneath and on the bottom of this stand, you can feel all that texture. They've hit it with a little bit of orange to simulate rust, and even some of the panels around the back have this lumpy, bumpy look to them, as though they've been welded or there's just hitting, as this thing has been sitting out in the rain over time. They've even added that around the sides. Now, you do have to install these little wheels, and they don't do anything. They just sit there, they're for show. Same thing with the levers on the side. They can move, just be careful because they catch on these little rivets sticking out there. Then on the other side, you have a completely different lever that you can also move left and right. Now, the bat signal itself can't rotate on the base, but you can just literally move the darn thing around. There are some little foam pads down below though, so it shouldn't scratch up your display if you do decide to rotate this thing from time to time. The top though does angle up and down. Now, there is this little bar down the bottom and this little latch that it's supposed to sit in. So technically you are supposed to have it like this. This is the optimal angle for the light to project the symbol onto your wall. If you do want to have it going up so you can project it onto the ceiling, also possible. Star of the show though has to be the front of the bat signal. This symbol literally looks like it's been cut out of a sheet of metal, and not very cleanly either. You can see how the edges are all peeled and nasty. There are also rivets absolutely everywhere, and it's asymmetrical. The rivets aren't in the same places from one side to the other. There are also some little spots of rust, and all of these louvers on the front have been ripped and torn, and they're all kinds of janky looking. Underneath this top layer though, we have a clear plastic lens. Then right down there on the inside, a mirrored back and a teeny tiny little LED. I get that that sounds counterintuitive going for a small LED rather than a large one in such a big bat signal, but if your goal is to project the bat symbol itself onto a surface with that LED, then going with a small one is the right call. That's just how light works. You want to maximize the distance between the LED and the image on the front, you want to mirror the back, and use a small LED. If you're just going for more of a warm glow effect, then yes, of course you can use a larger one. Now, to power the bat signal, it's just powered by a USB-C cable. Now, they've also printed the voltage on the side, so you know which kind of power source to use. I do wish that was underneath, though, rather than under this lip. At the very least, from top down, you're never really going to be able to see it. There is also a little on-off switch tucked around the back here. When you flick it, the bat signal turns on. I do wish that the light source was warmer rather than this cool blue tone. Still, because the projection effect is so freaking awesome, I'm kind of gonna give them a pass on this. If you don't and you're mad about the light source being incorrect, you can maybe try and change it perhaps? I'm not gonna do that. I am perfectly happy with the effect that we have going on here. Even though yes, more warm in tone is more screen accurate, it still looks pretty darn sick lit up, and the way it projects the bat symbol onto the shelf or your ceiling or a wall or something, I just don't think that can be beaten. I've never seen a bat signal work as well as this thing does, and yes, I will show you what this actually looks like projected onto a surface, because once you see it, I reckon you're going to forget all about the LED color. The Batcycle's screen time in the Batman was limited, to say the least. I am hoping we get to see more of it in the sequel, because this design for a Batman-themed motorcycle is too beastly to not reuse. The way it slopes down, how spiky it is around the back, and of course the bat-eared shaped shield for the front. Completely unnecessary, but I am so here for it. If you're wondering if this thing can roll, absolutely. Both wheels are nice and grippy, they're made of rubber, and they rotate, so you can have this thing zooming around in the display. The design of the Batcycle, around the back at least, is asymmetrical. We've got the twin brake pads, painted in high gloss with a little bit more dirt on the bottom one, which does make sense because it's closest to the ground, and some rubbery hoses for the brake lines. Then for the brake disc, it's painted in silver, and it rotates with the wheel. Whereas on the other side, we've got the chain, which doesn't move. I would have liked to have seen that actuate as we roll the wheel. I understand, very difficult, mechanically complex. Still, it would have been a nice touch. The wheel itself has some dirt on the inside. Then for the rubbery tire, it is absolutely filthy, on the side wall and in the tread. It's not overly squishy either, so I don't think it's going to deflate or deform over time. Now these panels have copped a lot of damage. You can see a bunch of silver scratching, some gradiented shading, and some black speckling, which I think is meant to replicate rain. As the light hits it, that speckling does show up really nicely. The sculpt work for the engine, to me at least, does look to be symmetrical. And I love how it sticks out on either side of the main body of the Batcycle, making this thing look like an absolute unit. We've got some airbrush shading in certain sections, some washes in crevices to bring out the sculpt work, got some rubbery hoses, including back here on the pedals, which by the way can't move, a mix of gloss, bright silver, some orange shading for the rust work, and also a satin finish. I just wish that there was some black on the tips of the exhaust to make it look like, there was some soot coming out of them. They do look a little bit clean to me. These, though, the springs that are real metal for the suspension, they are movable. Completely superfluous, completely unnecessary, but I am so here for it. When you push the Batcycle down, those springs actually move, and so too does the wheel. You're never really going to be able to use it, it's just a fun thing that you can do, pushing the Batcycle up and down. Real working suspension, tick. front tyre and wheel is just as well detailed as the back one, except the tyre itself this time is significantly skinnier. That's because this is rear-wheel drive, and considering the size of the engine and how much power is being sent back here, you're gonna want a nice big grippy tyre. Also, it's not asymmetrical. We've got a brake pad with that glossy finish and the speckling of dirt on both sides. Plus the rubbery hoses that work their way up to the top with some actual moving little pieces on the handles to simulate the brakes working. Normally a satin black vehicle would be pretty boring, yeah? I mean, just satin black. Nothing really to write home about. This time, however, they've tried something a little bit different. They've hit the surface with this green-blue flip, so depending on the angle that the light is bouncing off the surface, it reflects back a different hue. It just makes for a more visually interesting look. I mean, you can see the blue and a little bit of green on the high spots. They've also messed around with the finishes. We've got some glossy sections, the gas can cap, the frame and the handlebars, whereas the seat is more of a matte textured material, not rubbery like I thought it was going to be. Then the same thing with the handles, they're also a matte textured plastic. There is some red on the handlebars, and back here this little rivet is red, plus the mirrors, they're actual mirrors. Now you do have to install them, but it's relatively easy to do. They are keyed, so they only go in one way. They're supposed to slope downwards towards the ground. My favorite detail though about the entire Batcycle is this front shield. Completely impractical and also somewhat dangerous. If you think about it, if Batman brakes too hard, then he's flung forward. These spikes, they're a death trap. They're going right in his chest. Sometimes a bit of form over function isn't a bad thing. This light around the front has a ton of detail sculpted into that clear plastic lens. When the Batcycle also has a light up feature. Down below, this is a battery compartment. There's a single Phillips head screw and it takes 3 AAA batteries. Or you can use a USB-C cable. The only time where I'd probably guess you wouldn't use the USB-C cable is for figure photography, because then you don't have to Photoshop the darn thing out. This is just a little bit easier to work with without the cable dangling around down below. Once you have the batteries installed, you flick the switch, the tail light turns on, then the same thing for the headlight. Although, when you plug in the USB-C cable, the lights get significantly brighter, especially that front one. It literally projects the detail of the light onto a surface in front of it. It just adds to the ambience of having this really nice, warm, rich glow around the front. Before we try and pop Batman on here, I do want to talk about the stands, because you do have 2 options. The first one is this angled stand. It says the Batman on it. That's actually sculpted into the surface. And then we have just a normal flat one. It also says the Batman. You're wondering where these go? It's this cross beam right here. You're supposed to just sit it on that crossbeam, and then the Batcycle can stand on its own. This one just has it sitting flat, of course, because it's the neutral one. Or if you decide you want something a little bit more dynamic, you can bring in the angled one. For me, I'm going angled all day long. I just think it looks way more interesting. To get Batman ready to ride the Batcycle, not really all that challenging, still a touch involved. The first thing you want to do is remove his cowl, then you want to take off the Velcro chest plate. Just be careful not to do this too much because Velcro does wear out over time, or hook and loop specifically. You want to remove the stock shorter cape if that's the one you have him wearing. If you have him already wearing the longer one, then you don't need to do any of this. He's already ready to go in terms of the cape. You want to plug the longer one in position, futz with the pleats to make sure they're sitting underneath the shoulder pads correctly. Bring back in the chest plate. These rubbery straps will slot under the underside of his cowl piece. And then make sure that you're not putting the chest plate either too high or too low. Push it down and lock it in position. After that, just pop his head sculpt back on. The next step is his belt. You want to take off the 2 canisters on the right holding his adrenaline shot, and then the 1 canister on the left holding the little sticky bomb gun mines. This next part is optional. The instructions do suggest you use the grapnel gun hands with the really tight grip and the fingers extended so it looks like he's pulling on the brakes. I don't really like that because the grip is super tight and it's putting a lot of pressure on the handlebars. I'm going to opt for the open palm hands, so I'm not putting all that pressure on them. Getting him ready to ride on the bike by taking off the little pouches on his belt and switching out the cape, all of that stuff is significantly easier than having to pose him on the darn thing. Getting the hands to sit on the handlebars the way they are, crunching him forward the way he is, the knees being bent fully, the same thing with the legs going all the way forward, and his feet on the pedals, none of that stuff is easy, so make sure you have enough time set aside to do this. And I don't even have him sitting all the way down on the seat. I tried, but I failed. Maybe you will have better luck than I have. Now, his cape being wired down the bottom does mean that you can have it self-suspending, as though he's driving through the streets of Gotham and his cape is being picked up by the wind. Although it does now expose the fact that his butt isn't on the seat, so I like to pull it down a little. The other issue is that this little piece on the cowl does stick down around the front, so from the side you can see it and it looks pretty ugly. From the 3/4, you can't really see it, and front on, it's not a massive issue. So just pick your angles carefully. For me, I'm going to have him more so standing and straddling the bike rather than actually riding it. Even though front on, yeah, this does look pretty awesome. For a quick side-by-side comparison, I thought we'd start off with my custom Robert Pattinson Batman. I still really like my custom, but it's nowhere near as good as the Hot Toys one. The Hot Toys body is better, proportions and articulation-wise. You get more accessories, the cape drape's better, you also get 2 of them, plus the head sculpts are vastly superior. Believe it or not, my custom was actually more expensive than the Hot Toys one. It comes with less stuff, and it's less accurate. Next up, the 6 Feet Lane Studio Riddler. This one just so happens to be my current Riddler in the Batman display, but it's by no means set in stone. If Hot Toys eventually decides to bring out their own version of the Riddler, then yeah, I will absolutely upgrade. This one is a little bit shorter than Batman, and I'm totally fine with that. A height difference between these two, yeah, works for me. So for right now, this is my Bruce Wayne in the display. It's the SL Custom release. It's not long for this world though. As soon as the in-art one comes in, this one's going right back in the box. I was hoping to upgrade the head sculpt with the Hot Toys one. It's just that he has the running eye makeup, so it doesn't really work on the business suit body. Just for a bit of fun, let's go through the eras of Batman in 1/6 scale. Starting off with Adam West. As you can see, he is a little bit shorter than Robert Pattinson. Then we had Michael Keaton, one of my all-time favourite Batmen, and this figure is also one of my all-time favourites by Hot Toys. He too is a little bit shorter than Pattinson. But this guy isn't. It's Val Kilmer in his sonar suit from Batman Forever. He also has to represent George Clooney, because Hot Toys hasn't, at the time of filming this video, actually made a George Clooney Batman. Yeah, significantly taller than Robert Pattinson, and you can see how different the suits are. We've got this very stylized comic booky 90s look versus a much more realistic take on the left. Now, it did take a few years, but we eventually got Christian Bale in the cape and cowl in Batman Begins. And following on from that, this suit in The Dark Knight. Some people would say that he was the best live-action Batman and this was the best Batsuit. We all have our personal preferences. Definitely wasn't for me. I still love Bale, don't get me wrong, but you all know who my favourite is. I found it pretty amusing actually that someone went after me really hard in the comments for one of my Affleck videos, saying, "Justin, what the hell, how can you say this is the best live-action Batman?" I actually never did, I just said that he's my favourite live-action Batman. Ben Affleck, his suit design, the way he moved, his performance as Bruce Wayne and the Caped Crusader, plus how beastly he was in the fight scenes, all of his gadgets, the Batmobile. I just love the vibe of Affleck as Batman, so sue me. In 1/6 scale, this is the 1.0 version from Hot Toys. He towers over Robert Pattinson. He's also wearing a Zhao 3D modeler head sculpt, a Jackson Zhu cape, and a full body repaint by yours truly. And lastly, Pattinson, the Bat Signal, and the Batcycle. Say you're absolutely crazy about this movie, like me, and you want to have everything Robert Pattinson the Batman themed in your display. This is what that looks like, and it's one hell of a setup. Yes, the Bat Signal has a large footprint, but it's not overly tall, so I think most people will be able to fit it in their displays. And the Batcycle, you can have him riding it. It's not super wide, but it's pretty long. If you have the depth to accommodate it, I think you'll be perfectly fine. Going over articulation, because of the Batcycle, I'm expecting it at the very least to be decent. He needs to pull off a convincing motorcycle riding pose. Starting off with the head sculpt, it's on an articulated neck, a ball joint at the base of it. Then the sculpt itself is magnetic. Looking forward to there, Looking up to there, plenty of range for either popping him on the motorcycle or in a gliding pose. Swivel, and tons of pivot side to side. The shoulder pads are separately articulated, so you can get the arms going up to there, going forward and back on soft ratchets, butterfly joint at the shoulder that hinges up and down. Swivel at the bicep underneath this bicep piece of armor, double bend at the elbow going just past 90 as the gauntlet and the armor collides. Then for the wrist peg, it's a hinge and swivel. The torso will be more limited because of all of this armor plating and padding. Crunching forward to there on ratchets, going back to there, swivel, and a little bit of pivot side to side. His legs will go forward to there, which is actually further than I was expecting. Going out to there, swivel at the upper thigh. Ratcheted double bend at the knee going pretty much the full way, and then a double ball peg for the ankles, plus a split cut boot design. Good for forward and back, swivel, and plenty of ankle tilt. Moving on to the 3 cool and 3 annoying things. The first annoying thing, and you probably guessed this one, it's the lack of a USB-C cable. Hot Toys, the Batcycle needs a USB-C cable, the display base needs one, and the Batcycle does. 3 things need USB-C cables. Do they even include one? No, they don't. Going forward, if you are going to use USB-C, which by all means absolutely go for it, also chuck in a cable. Surely you can afford to do that. The second annoying thing, and hey, don't get me wrong, I absolutely adore the Batcycle, but they did pull a fast one on us. They switched out the color temperature of the LED from a warm tone to a cool tone. And I just don't think it works as well for this interpretation of the Batcycle. Not only is it not movie accurate, but it's not even box art accurate. On the front of the box, this darn thing is pictured with a warm tone LED. Third annoying thing? Yeah, it's a pretty obvious one, I'd like to think. The top part of the base doesn't light up, but the bottom does. If you're going to do light up for the steps, you kinda have to do it for all of the red sections on the steps, because now it just looks really weird. Now, if only they'd had a little connector that you could have slid out, plugged into this top part of the base, and transferred power up to those LEDs in this top portion. That would have been my perfect solution. Still looks good, and I'd take the LEDs down below rather than having none at all. I just would have liked all of the steps to have lit up. It would have looked more cohesive, in my opinion. First cool thing is you have options for the power supply for the Batcycle. Say, for instance, you don't like the look of a USB-C cable sticking out the bottom of the Batcycle, which, yeah, I totally get that. You can remove this, pop open the battery compartment, chuck in some AAA batteries, and then that can be the power supply. You're not married to having to use the USB-C cable if you don't want to. The second cool thing, while the color temperature of the Batcycle isn't quite right, the projection effect is absolutely mind-blowing. This is one of the coolest things I've seen from Hot Toys in a while. You can actually make out the details on the Bat logo on the front of the Batcycle. And you can see all the little individual rivets going across those horizontal bars. Not exactly sure how they got this thing to look as good as it does when it's lit up, but I am so happy with how it turned out. The third cool thing is that you have a switch out cape, and I totally wasn't expecting this. I don't think it was even included in the original solicitation. You get a shorter one, let's call it battle length, and a longer one that's supposed to be used for the Batcycle. They even added wires down the bottom so you can get way more dynamic with the posing with the longer cape. Wrapping up on Hot Toys, The Batman, Robert Pattinson in the cape and cowl, from the 2022 film of the same name. Now, this might be a controversial hot take. I think this is their best release ever. Not just because of how much stuff it comes with, but yes, that does factor in, of course. It's the accuracy of the outfit, the material choices, how good the head sculpts are, yes, both of them I like, the interchangeable capes, the Batcycle if you decide to get it, the Batcycle which actually projects onto a wall properly, which is something that you just don't see very often, and then all of the stuff he comes with. You get just so many little bits and pieces and Easter eggs from the film, and the lenticular backdrop, and a sick diorama display base, which I think is their best diorama display base ever. So this figure does have a lot going for him. What about negatives, though? I really struggled with the pros and cons segment, honestly. This guy is that sensational that, if you're a fan of the film, I reckon you just go ahead and grab him. Yes, the in-art version is coming. At the time of filming this video, it's just not out yet. When it does eventually release, we'll of course get it in hand, do our comparisons, and decide which one is superior. If you want a The Batman figure today though, Hot Toys is your only option. They were first, and sometimes being first does matter, especially when your figure is not only timely but also really high quality. Namely because of all of that stuff I've already mentioned, the Batcycle, the Bat Signal, the accessories. It just comes together to make for a very compelling package. It's going to be pretty hard to beat if I'm being honest. If anyone can do it, it's InArt, we'll just have to wait and see. This, for me, feels like a return to form for Hot Toys. Like a step back in time to when they used to do those full-on DX-style releases. You get so much stuff and so much value. I've already said this in this very video, but I am over the moon with how this figure turned out. To cut a long story short, this is now my favorite Hot Toys figure of all time. I get asked that question a lot, and this is going to be my answer to that. You've seen how good this figure looks throughout this video, so I'm pretty sure you can understand where I'm coming from. Now, I got mine at a discount from Pop Collectibles. As always, do your own research. Make sure you are comfortable before buying. I have popped the link to their site in the description, along with the discount code Justin's Collection, for 5% off your order if you do decide to buy from them. While you're down there, why not hit that subscribe, bell notification icon, and join button, if you like the sound of seeing your name in the end credits of my reviews. Like, comment, and subscribe. We'll catch you in the next video.